Bruno left home today. It would be a very important day. He had worked for 2 years at a construction company, and today he had to undergo a kind of exam to be promoted to a better position. The bosses had arrived from the capital to retire the old branch director and appoint a new one. There were 3 candidates for the position, all of whom had carefully prepared. Each had to present a development plan for the company. Bruno had worked on his for almost a month, and he was sure his plan was the best. He loved his job. Bruno had read a lot since he was a child. That's when he decided he wanted to be a builder, and he was confident that he would do high-quality work, not like those who were building a new building in his neighborhood. The children used to play at the construction site. One day, a slab swayed over Bruno's feet. He tried to hold on but couldn't, and he fell from a height of 3 meters. Debris had been dumped below, and there were large chunks of concrete at the bottom. He fell precisely on them. At first, he didn't even lose consciousness, and it didn't hurt either. Then came the fear because he tried to get up, and that's when a sharp pain pierced his body. His friends were already running toward the site with the adults. 6 months in the hospital and 3 surgeries later, Bruno barely understood what was happening around him. He only begged his mother to take him home. "Mom, please, I can't take it anymore. Take me home." All she could do was cry and kiss him. Sometimes his father would appear. He would sit next to his bed and hold his hand in silence. After 6 months, they allowed him to go home for 3 months, but only temporarily. Bruno was already old enough to understand. He was 10 years old at the time. One morning, when his parents thought he was sleeping, Bruno heard them talking in the kitchen. He couldn't get up, but his mother always left the door open to hear if her son suddenly needed anything. "Joao, what are we going to do? He's scheduled for surgery in a month, and we don't have the money to pay," Camila said. "So, what do you suggest? Sell a kidney? Go ahead, find a buyer, and I'll sell it," Joao replied. "You know it can't be like that. We'll have to think of something different." "Camila, we have to reschedule the surgery, that's all," Joao argued. "Are you crazy? Did you hear what the doctor said? Every month, his chances decrease," Camila retorted. There was a noise in the kitchen as if the father had suddenly gotten up from his chair. "Camila, I'm doing everything I can. We've spent all the money, every last penny, you understand? And the money we saved for the car, the money we saved for repairs, everything, you understand? But no, you demand that I do more," Joao said. "I'm not demanding anything from you, Joao. It's just that I feel like you don't care. Do you realize that our son might never walk again?" "I'm sorry, yes, I realize," Joao replied. "And you, what have you done to help him recover?" "Your accountant's salary isn't enough, Joao," Camila accused. The front door slammed shut. It was evident that the father had already left. Bruno heard his mother's footsteps approaching the room, and he squeezed his eyes shut, pretending to be asleep. The tears wouldn't come out. Every day, the boy hoped to be taken to the hospital, but as time passed, Bruno realized that his parents hadn't found the money, and he would be condemned to stay in bed forever. He tried to distract himself. He read a lot, so much that his eyes grew tired and his ears became keenly attentive. At least the boy could fall asleep quickly. Then something happened that divided his life into 2 parts, before the betrayal and after. His mother, his mommy, the person he loved most in the world, abandoned him. It all happened in the middle of the night. His mother entered the room dressed to leave. She placed a small suitcase on the floor and sat on the edge of his bed. "How are you, son?" she asked. He put his book aside, as he always did. "Where are you going?" "Son, I have to go. I came to say goodbye. I want you to know that I love you very much. I love you more than my own life. You'll be fine, I promise," Camila said, giving him a quick kiss and hurriedly leaving. Bruno didn't understand that she wasn't leaving just for a day, but that his mother was leaving forever. She simply abandoned him. His father was by his side. He comforted him and supported him, and a week later, he managed to get the money for the surgery. When Bruno finally took his first step, he decided for himself that he no longer had a mother. He had a father who had become everything to him. After almost a year of rehabilitation, Bruno finally returned to school. His father managed to arrange for him to take express exams from the previous year. Bruno studied hard and was able to return to his classroom. Time passed, and his father brought Mariana home. Bruno didn't like her, but he was always very polite with her. How could he be angry with his father or tell him what to do? Now, in the present, he approached his car and paused for a moment. It had only been 15 days since he had bought the car, and he still wasn't tired of admiring it. As he got into the car, he saw a young woman on the sidewalk looking at him. At first, Bruno thought she looked like someone he knew, but when he looked more closely, he dismissed the possibility. What she was wearing had been out of fashion for a long time, so she wasn't someone he knew. The car started and the girl took a photo out of her pocket. The photo was of Bruno when he was very young. She sighed contentedly, grabbed her bag, and left the block. She would certainly return at night. When Bruno returned from work, he was very excited. Everything had gone exactly as he had planned. From that day on, he was the branch director. Few had achieved that at 29. He parked the car and opened the trunk, taking out a cake and some bottles of champagne. He called his father from the office and told him to set the table. However, he heard Mariana say he could take them to a restaurant, but he didn't want to be in a bad mood. He could have gone to a restaurant, but he wanted to be at home with his father, who had stood by his side and spared no effort to help him recover. Bruno turned around, and there stood the same girl from the morning. Up close, she was quite beautiful, with blue eyes and blonde hair. Maybe they did know each other. He thought of all the possibilities, but nothing seemed right, so he gave up. "Do we know each other?" he asked. "No, we don't," she replied. "Thank God, but I need to talk to you." Bruno raised an eyebrow. The girl was clearly hostile. Maybe he recognized her from his friend's country house, his colleague. They had spent a weekend partying, and to be honest, Bruno didn't remember half of it. "Well, let's talk then. I can give you 5 minutes." "I don't need that much time. Here's the address where your mother is. She's very sick. If you don't want to help her, at least go visit her. Maybe you won't see her again," the girl said, handing him a piece of paper. Bruno pulled back the hand that had mechanically taken the paper. "First of all, I don't have a mother," he said. The girl looked directly into his eyes. "You're mistaken, you do, and no matter how much you try to hide it, she's not going anywhere." "All right, have it your way." "I don't want to see her," Bruno replied. "Take her address and remember that not everything in life is exactly as we believe it to be." "Goodbye," she said, handing him a piece of paper and quickly walking away. The night was ruined. He didn't know why he hadn't told his father, probably because he didn't want to ruin his night too. His father didn't deserve that. 2 days passed, and Bruno couldn't stop thinking about the address in his pocket. On Saturday, after another night of uncertainty, he finally decided to go, just to look into the eyes of the one who had left him in such a state. The search took a long time. He wandered through the streets of a rundown neighborhood full of dilapidated buildings without finding what he was looking for. Then he saw her, the girl from the morning. He stopped. "Excuse me, what's your name?" he asked. The girl turned, surprised, and smiled. "You came after all." "Yes, I came. I just want to look into her eyes. Can you show me where that damn house is?" "It's right behind you," she replied. Bruno turned and cursed. There was even a sign on the building that he stubbornly ignored. The young man climbed to the second floor using the old, creaky stairs. He raised his hand to ring the doorbell and then lowered it. Mom. He couldn't remember anything bad about her, only how she had loved him, how she had cried beside his bed, how she had caressed his arm while he pretended to be asleep. He needed to regain his composure. Behind the door was the same woman who had abandoned him out of fear of difficulties. His father had convinced her to stay, promising to find the money, but the mother didn't want to listen to anyone. Apparently, she had someone more important than her son. The doorbell rang unexpectedly loud. Bruno realized that the door was slightly ajar. He entered and immediately heard a voice. Isabella, is that you? It was his mother's voice. Bruno stepped forward and entered. No, it's not Isabella, said the woman lying on the sofa. It's my son, Bruno. Yes, it's me. The woman tried to get up but couldn't. Bruno stood in front of her and couldn't overcome his feelings. He didn't want to help her. He didn't want to touch her. Camila must have noticed this. Son, sit down. There's a chair there. Bruno sat down and looked around. The misery stared at him from every corner. A terrible, total misery. Everything seemed clean, but it felt like he was in a den. A woman cursed loudly in the street. Bruno's mother smiled slightly. The neighbors and their confusion are normal here. How are you, son? Bruno smiled sarcastically. Don't you think it's a bit late to ask me that? I'm sorry. He felt his mother's gaze on him, and then he noticed a picture of himself as a child on the table beside the sofa. It's incredible how hypocritical he was. Now he finally understood. Apparently, her other husband had left a long time ago, perhaps without reason, or maybe because she was sick in some way. She found out that Bruno was doing well in life and decided to ask him for money, of course. That explains everything. Why did you look for me? What do you want, money? Then stop pretending and acting. Get up. Why don't you at least offer me a coffee? Camila tried to get up again. She even managed to put her feet on the ground but didn't have the strength to do more. She cried silently. I'm sorry, son, I can't get up. The door opened, and Isabella entered the room. She hurried over to Bruno's mother. Are you crazy? They told you not to get up. The girl made Camila lie down again and turned to Bruno. What were you doing? Why did you let her do this? Please, I should have made her lie down again. I understand her plan. She didn't need to create all this drama. She could have just asked for the money, and that would have been it. Isabella approached him furiously. Calm down, Isabella, please. He doesn't know anything, Camila cried inconsolably. Isabella crossed her arms and said, It's very convenient not to know anything. If you don't know, you sleep better, right, Bruno? You have a good life, so get out of here. Your mother saw you, and that's enough. You can leave now. A weak voice came from the sofa where Camila was lying. Isabella turned abruptly, ran to Camila, and shouted to Bruno, Call an ambulance. Call an ambulance. She has heart problems. He typed something into his phone and didn't understand anything. Did she really call him just to see him before dying, probably to ask for forgiveness? And that crazy girl wouldn't let her? The ambulance took Camila, and he followed. He made sure that his mother received all the help she needed and asked the doctor, When can I visit? Tomorrow afternoon. Don't miss it. The prognosis is guarded. Bruno left the hospital and soon saw Isabella sobbing on a bench near the entrance. He approached and sat next to her. Why are you crying? The doctor said you could visit her tomorrow. She looked at him with her big, teary eyes. Are you sure? I'm sure. Do you want me to take you home? Well, if you can. Bruno left the hospital parking lot. He would have to come back tomorrow to give his mother the opportunity to apologize and calm down. But if she expected to establish a relationship, she wouldn't succeed. They arrived at the familiar buildings. "Which one do you live in?" Isabella, who had been silent the whole way, said, "I live in the same building as Camila, just in a different entrance." "So you're neighbors?" She looked at him in surprise and then smiled. "Is that strange for you?" Bruno felt embarrassed. "No, of course not. It's just that you're going to see your mother tomorrow." "Yes, I promised the doctor I would go." "At what time, if I may ask?" Bruno felt satisfied. Was she in love with him? Well, she dressed modestly but had a good figure and face. "At 3 p.m. "Okay, I'll go later. I guess you won't stay there long." "Why later?" Bruno thought he had understood something wrong. Isabella had already gotten out of the car, but before closing the door she said, "So I don't run into you." The door slammed shut. Bruno watched for a while longer, finally shaking his head. Isabella was no longer in sight. She must have gone into the building. Bruno hit the steering wheel with his hands. This is ridiculous. What does she think she's doing? Who does she think she is? He drove home at high speed, anger boiling in his chest. How could this be possible? His mother abandoned him when he was sick. She didn't want to take on the responsibility of caring for him, and now, with the help of that little snob, she was trying to make him feel guilty about something. No way, he's not a fool. They can all go to hell. He wouldn't even go to the hospital tomorrow, let them sort out their own mess. Bruno was so angry that he didn't see the red light. A noise of tires, a crash, and darkness. He struggled to wake up, or rather, he wasn't asleep, but still couldn't wake up. Nothing hurt, there was an emptiness around him, but he knew he could hear everything. Why couldn't he wake up? He could barely hear the light footsteps of someone. It was her, the little one. Yes, it was her, Isabella. He made an incredible effort to open his eyes, looked at Isabella, and then she disappeared. Immediately after, the doctor's face appeared. "What's your name?" "Bruno." "How old are you?" 29. "Perfect." The doctor shined a light in Bruno's eyes, making him close them immediately. "Very well, rest now." The man disappeared, and Isabella appeared again. "I won't take long. Your family just left. Your stepmother is such an unpleasant woman. How did you live with her?" "She was all over the place, trying to get a document that said you wouldn't be disabled after the accident. Your father tried to calm her down, but she was screaming like a madwoman that she was going to file for divorce. She said she wouldn't live under the same roof as your disabled son." "That doesn't surprise me. I'm even starting to get used to it." "To what?" "Whenever something happens to me, everyone abandons me." "You're talking about your mother, right?" Isabella's eyes shone with anger. She guessed but continued, "You shouldn't talk like that, although, who am I telling this to? I thought you had hit your head so hard that this would make some sense to you, but no, you're still where you were. You know, I thought better of you at first. I mean, I expected that you would at least try to find out the truth, to know who was responsible. But you..." Isabella couldn't find the right word and then just said, "Better," and soon the girl headed for the door. Bruno watched her and closed his eyes. He never imagined there were people capable of making him lose his temper in 2 minutes. Despite being in bad shape, full of medication, he thought, spoiled girl. What is she always talking about? What truth? What is it that he doesn't know that should make him change his mind about the world? His head hurt now. He wanted to know the terrible secret Isabella was always talking about. On the other hand, she could have told him, but no, she made a big drama and ran away. Pity her husband, if she has one. The doctor came to see him at night. "How are you?" "I'm fine." "Good, what can I say? It's not so bad. You can sit up, get up slowly. You hit your forehead, but luckily you have a strong forehead." Bruno immediately sat up. He felt dizzy, but it was bearable. "Doctor, tell me, was a woman admitted here yesterday?" "Yes, her name is Camila. She was admitted to this hospital." "How can I find her?" The doctor frowned thoughtfully. "Weren't you the one who came with her?" "Yes, I was. I took care of her." "She's in room 7, the doctor replied, "in the opposite corridor to this one." The doctor then said, "That's out of the question. You still can't go that far. We'll monitor you for 1 or 2 days, and then you'll be able to move freely." The doctor left. Bruno waited another half an hour. The hospital was already quiet. He slowly walked to the door and looked out. There was no one in the corridor, only cheerful voices coming from the nurse's room. Apparently, the girls were chatting. Bruno leaned against the wall and walked to the door of the corridor. He opened it and went down the corridor. He stopped for a moment and headed for the door in front of him. There was no one in the corridor either. The moment was very opportune. The patients had eaten and gone to bed, and now the staff could eat and rest too. Room 7 was right in front of him. There was no time to think. He pulled the door toward him. His eyes took a while to adjust to the darkness, and when they did, he could see his mother clearly. She was lying by the window. Both beds were empty, and a woman was sleeping at the other end. "Bruno," she said. His mother looked at the bandage on his head. "What happened to you, son?" "Nothing important. I hit my forehead. You know why I'm here." She shook her head negatively. "You have to tell me why you abandoned me. I thought I didn't care, but now I realize I would like to know. I want to understand who got in your way so that you decided to abandon a sick child." Camila was silent for a minute before she replied, "I didn't abandon you, Bruno. It's just that I didn't have any other choice." Bruno interrupted, "Lies? No one forced you to leave. You made that decision on your own, didn't you?" "Of course I did. No one forced me." Bruno sighed. "Just tell me why, and I'll leave." Frankly, Bruno felt disappointed. Only now did he realize that he had allowed himself to think that he could forgive her after she told her story. Well, not completely, but a little. He wanted to help her with the treatment, maybe even more. But how could he help someone who had done that to him? "It was because of you," she said. "I understand a sick child is a burden, but you had to go somewhere, right? Fine, I'll tell you everything, but it's a long story." "I'm not in a hurry," the man said. Camila sighed and closed her eyes. "Your surgery was postponed once again. I realized that the chances were becoming smaller and smaller. There was no money, none at all. I tried to get a loan to mortgage my apartment, but everywhere they offered so little that the amount didn't even cover half of the expenses. 3 months after you were discharged, I started to notice that your father smelled of another woman's perfume and had lipstick stains on his shirt. That's when I realized Joao wasn't going to help. He had distanced himself from everything. He had his own life separate from us. I needed to do something as quickly as possible." Bruno looked at his mother, completely confused. She was saying strange things. His dad had always been by their side. He had arranged the damned sum of money, but Bruno had never asked where it came from. Besides, he remembered well, after the surgery, somehow they had managed to have a better life. Dad had started his small business. Yes, he was never home, but Bruno, although not fully grown, was fully aware that his father had to work hard. Continuing, one day, exhausted from begging banks, I sat in a park and cried. Then someone called my name. I looked up and saw my friend. Things had been so hectic due to recent events that we hadn't seen each other for almost a year. She sat beside me and we talked. She was very indignant with your father. She was so upset. She said goodbye with these words, "I'll think too, and if I find something, I'll call you immediately." I don't know if it can be called luck, but just 2 days later, her boss's daughter ran over a man and took his life. She fled the scene. Mariana, seeing that her boss was worried, asked if something had happened. They had a good relationship and he told her everything. Together, they found a way to solve the problem. She called me that night and said that her boss was willing to pay me double the amount I needed for the surgery. I had an hour to think. Your father wasn't home. Mariana said I could use the remaining money on the best lawyer I could find to reduce the sentence. Yes, she offered to go to prison instead of the daughter. I accepted. I knew I wouldn't see you for a long time, but you could run like before. Your father only showed up in the morning. I told him everything and he supported me, saying he would ensure I received the least sentence possible. Your father couldn't attend the trial because he was at the hospital with you. Mariana also didn't come, but I was sure you would get help. I thought about appealing my case later. I was sentenced to 9 years. I don't know why so many years. Apparently, there were aggravating circumstances, or maybe the man who died was someone important. As you can imagine, there was no appeal of the case. There were no lawyers, nothing, and I couldn't tell the truth. That would have worsened things. The money was paid, and you had your surgery. That woman kept her promise. I was released on parole after 7 years. I went straight to our house, eager to see you, but it was Mariana who opened the door for me. Unfortunately, she insisted on keeping things as they were. She was the one your father used to visit at night, not the body. Not everyone can handle what we had at home back then. A puzzle formed in Bruno's mind. Money, a better life, Mariana. Everything was so simple. So I left. Mariana explained to me that you hated me and that your father loved her, that you were a family without me. No one wanted me anymore. I rented this place in a cheap neighborhood. They don't charge me much. I got a job at a factory. Many times I came to our building, then to the university. I looked at you from afar. I cried. I admired you. You've become such a handsome and intelligent man. I'm so proud of you. I would never have stood in your way. But Amelia, once, I told her everything. She was boiling with indignation all the time, and when I got sick, she decided to find you. I was against it, but she is stubborn. Yes, that's true. Bruno was silent for a while, digesting the information, getting used to it. Why didn't you tell me everything? Fine, if I hadn't heard it, you could have written a letter. But Camila remained silent. Bruno said with difficulty, "Mom, can you hear me?" She was silent again. Bruno looked at the bed. Camila's arm hung limp. Her cheeks were wet with tears, her eyes closed, and her lips were white, with a slight bluish tint. "Mom." He touched her, and her other hand also felt like a lifeless rag. Bruno hugged his mother by the shoulders. Mom, not now, please." He shook her and shouted. Tears streamed from his eyes. Camila's face slumped onto the pillow. "Mom." He stepped away from the bed. He didn't want this. He wanted to be there with his mother. The feeling was so strong that he fainted. He woke up in his hospital room. His father was sitting next to him. Bruno looked at him. He simply didn't understand how he could continue living his life. Why couldn't he live without hating someone? He had hated his mother so much, and now he would have to hate his father too. "Dad." Joao woke up, opening his eyes. "Is it all true, everything Mom told me?" Joao looked his son in the eyes. "Yes, Bruno, it's all true. I'm sorry it happened this way. I understand that you probably don't want to see me, and you know you're right. I bought a ticket to go to my sister's. Her husband passed away, and it's hard for her to raise 2 children alone. Alive there. I left everything to you. You'll find the papers at home. Mariana went with someone luckier. Goodbye, son, and forgive me if you can. The father walked towards the door. It was as if he expected Bruno to call him. He hoped for it, but Bruno didn't do it. Months later, son, why are you so nervous? It's your wedding day. You're acting like a child. Camila looked at her son with a smile as he nervously fiddled with his tie and bow tie. Camila had returned from Germany 2 months ago after undergoing complicated heart surgery. Bruno sold his father's business as soon as he found out the surgery was possible. But Bruno was determined. The money was already hers. It was hard to recognize Camila. She looked like she had lost 20 years. Mom, how can I not be nervous? It's like you don't know Isabella. She might change her mind 18 times and run away from the wedding, Bruno said. Camila interrupted him. She won't change her mind, my son. She loves you. Do you really think so? Bruno sat down next to his mother on the couch, and she hugged him. Of course I do. I think she fell in love with you the first time she saw you. But don't tell her or I'll get in trouble. Mother and son left. Now they have a family and even family secrets.